Good evening, I'm Barbara. In November of 1979, we learned on the evening news that in the country of Iran, the capital of Tehran, Iranian militant students captured and were holding hostage over 60 American diplomats and citizens. Most of the people in America in 1979 didn't know couldn't find Iran on a map. And they certainly didn't know the capital was Tehran. But I knew, and my family knew, because we had lived there 10 years earlier when the Shah was a good guy. Americans were well thought of, and Iranian women could go to school. 2 days after the hostages were captured at the American Embassy, Operation Eagle Claw began being planned. During this time, I was a 22-year-old living on the Emerald Coast in Fort Walton Beach, Florida. It was a good gig. I was an Air Force active duty airman working on helicopters and C-130 aircraft and gunships. It was very common for us to go places, to pack up the planes, to pack up the equipment, and take everybody. We would go places, we would train, we would learn, we would practice. We had an annual trip to Korea. During this time, it became more common for us to go to Saudi Arabia. So a lot of us would be just hanging back in the shops, working on planes, but a lot of the planes were gone. And they would be off training for a couple of months, then people would come back, and then they would go again. So this was commonplace, it was peacetime, and it was just the way kind of things were. And I think what you were talking about earlier about you gave your oath and you knew it was a possibility, but you really didn't think it was going to be during your time. We were traveling back and forth, back and forth. And then one day, they took the women off of the package. And that could only mean one thing. It was go time. We didn't know who or where or how or when. We just knew that a lot of our folks and our planes were gone. And so we waited. It took a couple of days before we began to hear the news and learn what happened with Operation Eagle Claw. The plan was for all of the armed forces together to participate, to go in and get the hostages and pick them up and bring them home. Our job at my base was we were going to take the cargo planes and the helicopters and go into the desert outside of the capital of Tehran. And we were to wait. And what we learned later was the other branches were going to go in and locate the hostages. They were going to secure the hostages. They were going to transport them to our planes outside of the capital. And then they would be flown to a ship in the Persian Gulf. It was a complicated and daring rescue plan. 2 weeks before our planes flew in, they went out to check out the site, and everything looked good. But the night that the planes flew into the dark area labeled Desert 1, there had been before that a sandstorm called a haboob, where when the planes landed, there was several inches of sand. So that when they landed and the helicopters kicked up the sand, it damaged the aircraft. The President of the United States, along with the commanders on scene, made the hard decision to abort the mission. As the planes and helicopters were leaving, one of the helicopter's rotors hit the fuselage of a 130, and there was a catastrophic fire. Both planes burned. The decision was made on site for everybody to leave the helicopters and go get in the 130s and leave. They also decided to leave 8 guys that had burned. Not too many years ago, I was on a school trip with my daughter, and we went to Washington, D.C. We got to go to the monuments and to the Smithsonian, and we were at Arlington Cemetery when we were making our way across the cemetery to go to the changing of the guard. And I passed by this area dedicated to Operation Eagle Claw. It was beautiful, and it was fitting for the people, the men, the women that tried to rescue over 50 American hostages. As I stood there and looked at the headstones and read the words about what had happened, all of the things that I'm telling you right now flooded through me. And I couldn't help but think about how hard everybody tried to bring these American diplomats and citizens home. That was in April of 1979. In January of 1980, the day that President Jimmy Carter handed over the presidency to the new President of the United States, Ronald Reagan, that day, the hostages were released, and all of them began their journey safely